Okay, well, it's a couple minutes after, so I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you guys all for joining today. Welcome to Tech Transfer 101. This is the second session of a three-part webinar series. The purpose of the series is to provide program examples, challenges, and solutions for academic administrators with small or not yet established offices. And our audience is administrators, at academic institutions in the Southeast IDEA states. I'm Liz Knapp. If I haven't met you in our previous session, I'll be the moderator today. I'm the program manager for the Accelerator Network and also on staff at the University of Kentucky Office of Technology Commercialization. Today, our webinar will be recorded with the exception of the autumn video. So we just ask that you keep your microphones muted until the open discussion, which we'd love to hear from you. Please put your questions in the chat box then, or raise your hand and we'll call on you. Today, what we're going to do is show a 26-minute clip of an autumn video, and then we'll have about 12 minutes of presentations from our speakers, and then we'll have an open discussion. So what I'd like to do, if you haven't met our speakers yet, I'd like to introduce them and then also the video. Today we have Allyson Best from the University of Mississippi. She's the director of the Office of Technology Commercialization, and she'll be representing the perspective of a small tech transfer office. Ian McClure is the executive director at the Office of Technology Commercialization at the University of Kentucky. He'll be representing the perspective of a large tech transfer office. We have about 20 full-time employees, and I think Allyson has about 4 full-time employees. That's right. And then we also have David Gulley. He's the founding director of the Tech Transfer Office of the Puerto Rico Science, Technology, and Research Trust, which is a regional TTO, he's waving, providing services to the island's public and private universities. So he will present the perspective from serving many universities at the same time. With that, I'm going to switch over to our slides and just review a little bit what we saw last time. So we were watching Bridging the Gap Between Innovation and Technology Transfer, which was a webinar that was hosted by Molly, was the regional director of the Rocky Mountain United States Patent and Trademark Office. And she was basically posing questions to 4 other tech transfer officers. So we heard from Louisiana State University, Wichita State University, UC Irvine, and then New Tech Ventures, which is a nonprofit technology commercialization affiliate of the University of Nebraska. And so in this session, in that session, they presented their programs and some strategies and some offerings there. But in this session, what we're going to hear about is basically these 4 questions they're going to answer, which is, what are the regional challenges and advantages at your university? How do you attract investors? And then how do you ensure you have enough funds to file for your patents? So with that, just wanted to give that brief introduction. It'll be about 26 minutes, so hang on and we'll come back and then move into our live webinar. So let me just get the video up, and I'm going to make a few adjustments here. The first thing I'm going to do is pause our recording. Okay, so I think our first speaker up is David, and David's going to present a slide here on some aspects of the Puerto Rico Science and Research Trust.
Great, thanks, Liz. Welcome. I'm sort of virtually in Puerto Rico there, but I'm actually in Chicago here. So what I want to talk about a little bit in this regional challenge is Puerto Rico has a number of private institutions, including several medical schools, but it also has a land grant institution, the University of Puerto Rico, which has 11 campuses. So in 2015, when I went to do some assessments for the Puerto Rico Science, Technology, and Research Trust about the technology transfer activity on the island, the University of Puerto Rico was the only campus that had a technology transfer office, and it was more of a patent filing office. They had done no licenses at all. the universities there do compete for US federal funds, so BIDOL applies, but there'd never been any licensing. And they were filing essentially a couple of patents a year. The legal resources also were minimal on the island. There were less than 15 patent agents and attorneys on the island, and really 2 firms that had a few attorneys there that had backgrounds in science and engineering, but when we looked at the research base, it was about 2/3 life sciences. So we didn't have any legal expertise locally that had PhDs in the life sciences that would be well suited to work with inventors from the life sciences and inventions from the life sciences. So that again was another regional challenge for us. Multiple institutions, multiple policies, very little experience and so on. So we built this tech transfer office as a regional office under a private nonprofit organization, the Puerto Rico Science Trust, with these advantages that we also have a grants program that supports research and development at our partner institutions. We have SBIR, STTR matching funds. We have an accelerator program that really focuses on early stage technologies and entrepreneurship in the tech space mostly. And we have a number of partners where we have structured particular research centers, built labs for that, and have those structured partnerships. So in our process, what we look at is this research discovery process. We have then our advantages. We have a single portal for all of those universities, for all of those inventors to be able to disclose to the tech transfer office. And that portal is shared with each of those university partners, and a number of them you can see there. Let's go ahead, Liz. So the second part, and some other folks had talked about this. Liz, you can advance, there we go. The evaluation and screening process. So we use a robust process, one I learned at the University of Illinois over many years, and that has deployed in many, many other universities as well. So we use analytics, platforms like PatSnap, we use Invention Evaluator for a few things, and we train interns as well as our staff on being able to conduct those screening and evaluations to be very consistent, to be non-biased, and also transparent and have those discussions with our researchers. So that's very, very important for us. Go ahead, Liz. Part of building confidence was to find law firms that had the kind of expertise that aligned with our discoveries. And so we initiated a number of engagements with some very large firms and some that are a bit smaller. Ferreoli is the only one there that is in Puerto Rico that has the kind of expertise that we need for some inventions. But some of those other law firms you see operate all over the world. And we engage with them based on the scientific discovery. So that builds confidence, I think, with our researchers that they can actually talk to patent attorneys and teams of folks at those places that really understand their science. So it makes the process a lot easier for our faculty. Go ahead, Liz. So when we think then about how we also build confidence, we've also engaged with a number of platforms that work for us. And in order to move our inventions out and to market those, and you can see a number of the platforms there. Some of them are very specialized. Some are broad-based, like InPart, for example. But we use those to get information back and feedback back for our particular inventors and for those inventions. Go ahead, Liz. So when you talk about then this idea about having an unlimited budget, we have an approach, we call it, our TTO is a shared risk, shared reward, where we'll pay 100% of all the costs that are associated with all of this work, or we also offer the opportunity for the university to share those costs with us 50-50. And that then produces a revenue sharing arrangement. So whoever's paying the majority of the costs is going to be able to receive essentially the larger share of the revenue, considering at all times that all of the inventors receive their full shares that are due under those inventor policies. In attracting inventors, the Trust has a number of events, and we train researchers before attending those events on how to discuss their particular discoveries with inventors, and we work with them to do that. So, and maybe filing, we probably file about on each of our for disclosures. We've probably filed about on 2/3 right now. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, David. That's a good comparison with what we heard from the speakers there. Allyson, I think you're up next. So I'll go ahead and advance your slide. Maybe. Here we go.
Okay. So good day, everyone. What I wanted to spend just a few minutes on, especially in light of some of the excellent comments in the video, was again from the perspective of a smaller and growing office. For those of you that are out there and considering taking on these challenges, one of the key things that we stress, take advantage of, are these regional assets that are there, the challenges that may be in your region, in your state, and how you can use those to take these first couple of steps for the efforts that you want to get into. Some of the things I'm listed here are really things that you can do without spending a lot of money. When you're considering what's going on in not only your organization, but also in your region and in your state. So when you're thinking about taking this on especially from those first steps, or if you've had one or two, what I like to call ad hoc successes or patents, or like as David was saying, if you're filing patents, but you realize that there's no commercialization efforts, we really recommend that you do take a moment and take the time to perform that gap analysis. It can be as formal as you want it. Obviously, there are consultants out there that would love to do that for you. But it also can just be a very informal analysis. And for those of you that were on the call earlier, we talked about some of those strategies in terms of looking at your press releases and figuring out, talking to some of your department chairs that are very active, not only maybe in active research awards, but those that are actively engaged in putting in a lot of awards. So taking the time to do that first internal analysis, though, also includes some of the things that we have up on the thing today in terms of your administration's goals. Where do you see your key executive level administration? Are they talking about this? And that could just be a series of questions to them in terms of what their goals are. Do they view it more from an economic development perspective in terms of facilitating local, regional economic development, or are they interested more in the commercialization? Do they view it as a more balanced approach? These are the types of things that you need to take a temperature check within your administration. The second one is also really important. Then again, it can come from an exercise as simple as the press release reviews, talking to your communications teams, talking to your deans, talking to another great asset in this second bullet are advisory boards within your different schools, within your university. I learned a tremendous amount 5 years ago. I asked for 5 minutes with our local advisory, with our each individual unit's advisory board. The School of Engineering has one, our School of Business had one, Liberal Arts has one. What you get there are who are your champions in this area, who are actively engaged, either professionally through their own work experience, and how do they feel about this effort? This is, you get tremendous feedback. I also have the word detractors there, because what you also want to do, and they hit on this in the video very good, very, very well, is what are the expectations from your champions? Are they expecting very large scale successes right out of the gate? Are they a champion for you, but as Andy said in the video, they don't quite have a working knowledge of how this works? So having those sort of what I call means and bounds over the discussion is critical. The next three are, again, really key assets with working in terms of who your current industry partners are, if any, your development office. That's a subject that sometimes we have to be careful about. Some development officers and some development offices are very supportive of this conversation. Some of them still have some learning to do in terms of how these efforts can be complementary. So just be prepared for that if you've not had that conversation before. And then the last four are the assets that you have in your state now. And they're at the local, state, and regional effort. And especially the folks that are on this call today, and especially this grant, that's why we're here. Again, as I said last time, don't reinvent the wheel. I mean, don't start from scratch. Reach out, find out what their goals are, find out where you can plug and play into those assets. Thank you.
Sorry, I was trying to find my mute button. Allyson, thank you. That was incredibly insightful. Really great advice for some of these folks getting their feet established. Next up, Ian, I'm going to go ahead and stop share, and you can take over the screen.
All right. I'm assuming you can see my slide now. Can you see the slide now? There you go. Liz, you can see that?
I can see it.
Okay. Good deal. So this is something I want to go through some basics in faculty messaging that I believe have been very valuable in our approach in building culture on campus. And really it involves a marriage of three different perspectives in what I call the commercialization incentives. There always needs to be incentives, right, to engage in a certain type of activity. And around commercialization, there are three different incentives that have to be married. And that is the incentives and the perspective of the faculty member or the innovator. What is their value proposition to them? And then the perspective of the technology transfer unit or the persons responsible for those efforts. What is their perspective? And really that's the perspective of the opportunity to the university. So representing the university's interests. And then there's the third party partner, the industry or the investor perspective and the value proposition to them. So how do you marry those? And then how do you have, most importantly, how do you have the conversation to the faculty innovators to help them understand that you have to marry these three perspectives to get where you need to go? And so the first is the perspective of the faculty member, right? So you have to understand their priorities, and their priorities are going to be around the publication, the dissemination of knowledge, the ability to collaborate with co-researchers or peers, the peer review process. All of those are going to be paramount to pretty much anything, right? When they're focused on their tenure and promotion policies and their ability to get to tenure, or if they're already tenured, these are the things that are going to be most important to them. So that's the first thing we have to marry. But to the university, to the technology transfer responsible organization or unit, everything is going to be an opportunity, right? So when an invention comes in, the faculty member is thinking, please just go ahead and file on this because I need to publish. But the technology transfer entity is looking at each one of the things like, oh, this could be the next billion-dollar idea for our university, right? And so it's all opportunity. And then we work from sort of a glass full perspective. And then you know, each time we go through a de-risking, we first evaluate it, then we might do some additional de-risking, some customer discussions with potential customers to get feedback in the market. And then those opportunities, we start sort of knocking each opportunity off the pole to actually come down to what is a good opportunity. So that's the perspective of the university. But then we come to the perspective of the industry, right? So these are our partners, our investors, or the corporations that we need to partner with to license, or even a startup, right? So or the investors that might back that startup. To them, from their perspective, they're looking at cost, effort, risk, the things that they have to take on to continue to develop this technology and to make that investment. Right. So it's not just an opportunity to them. They're the ones that have to take it across this valley of death. Right. So this is, if you haven't heard of this concept, this is the view from the industry of how do I get it across this valley of death? And I'm going to be the 100% responsible to get it through each of these stages to the other side of this valley through feasibility testing, validation, proof of concept, market testing, prototype building, product development, product manufacture, and then even sales, right? So importantly, to help faculty understand those incentives, there's also some good things that we can use. And if you're not aware of them, these are some little tidbits that I like to throw into some conversations with faculty that are very new to this, not really understanding why they need to engage, but maybe their faculty advisor or their department chair told them that they need to come and talk with us. Here are some interesting things that are from empirical studies and published articles around the importance of this type of activity to them. And so getting over that hump with the faculty messaging, here's some stats. They're 20, so these are faculty inventors that engage in patenting and or starting a company around their ideas. They become 29% more productive than their collaborators if they engage in that type of activity. They have a 26% increase in publications after patenting or startups. They have a 25% increase in citations, a 40% increase in odds of commercializing, right, if they actually patent and don't just rely on publishing. 85%, this is important for the tech transfer perspective, the university perspective, their talent. 85% of faculty entrepreneurs don't leave, right? So it's not just a big scary thing. If you encourage entrepreneurial activity, don't worry. Most of them are going to remain your top faculty talent, research talent on campus. Most of them are not going to go on entrepreneurial leave and stay, or they will return to academia. That's what they really want to do, right? And then the last one is one that I love to throw out, that if they engage in patenting and startup founding, then they are 12 times more likely to be among the highest cited in their field. And when we're pulling at the strings of things that are important to faculty researchers, of course, that's going to be one of the most important ones. So this type of messaging has worked for us. Here's a view of just our commercialization activity over the past 5 years. When we started this type of messaging, we have a faculty education series. We go out in front of department chairs and in front of colleges. We have a 3-part series. One of them is focused on faculty messaging and these types of incentives. It's worked for us, right? We've had invention disclosure increases double the last 3 years relative to the 3 years before that, where we have filed 500% more patents, done 400% more licenses, and we've had a lot more startup activity. And that's not to say that sort of activity did not exist 5 years ago. It just was a little bit dormant because this type of messaging was not being taken advantage of and conveyed with the consistency that it needed to be. So I'll stop there.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ian and Allyson and David. Thank you for those presentations. We didn't have anybody put questions in the chat box, so maybe just take a minute for those who have joined us. Feel free to come off your videos if you want to interface with us, and if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat. You have a wealth of knowledge here to draw on in the next few minutes. We have about 7 minutes of time. Okay, so we have one from Mike Roberts at Coastal Carolina. He says, from the recorded panel presentations, how cheap is cheap for filing a provisional patent?
Well, it depends. So if you're filing as many patents as we did, we filed about 95 or so provisional patent applications last year. We have some fee volume discounts with our attorneys, and we can file provisional patents for $1,500 or so. The filing fee, if you can do it from within, is only about $300 something, but normally you're going to spend for a few hours of time of your attorneys. Now, not all provisional applications are equal, right? You can file what's called just a wrapper, right? And it's just the manuscript, so to speak, of the idea, a one-page description. Or you can get a little more detailed and spend a little bit more money to actually craft some claim language that you would like to see when you convert that provisional. But on average, we file ours for about $1,800 per provisional.
Great question. Okay, we have, and Hamid from West Virginia had the same question. Now, Norma, Frank has a question. Can you address more about the advisory board? Who should be included?
Who's got
Maybe,
an advisory board? I
yes.
don't know. Does David, you guys have an advisory board, or Allison?
Mm, Not that's official. I mean, we have a regular board, but we don't really consider them advisory. We consider them more trustee board. We do work with research leaders at each of our campuses, and we communicate with them as a group. So in a way, there's sort of advisory.
Yeah, and at Ole Miss, we do, we have what we call an innovation management group. And, you know, there's there's probably multiple schools of thought on this, because when you open up review and triage, it has its own set of challenges and opportunities. We used our advisory group as an engagement tool, and we still use them that way, and we find it very, very beneficial. And so we use, mostly it's our ADRs, our Associate Deans for Research, a couple of inventors, long-term inventors, those types of things. And then we also have Transactional Law Clinic, and then at the University of Mississippi, and we have the business operations for the various units on there.
So we actually convened we call it an Innovation Economic Development Committee. We have 4 deans on the committee, and that was strategic. We needed very high-level administrators on the committee, which raises up the importance in their eyes, and then to other deans that are not on the committee, of this type of activity, because you've got 4 deans that meet regularly to sort of review things that we're doing and things that are related to stuff we're doing. We also have a representative from our Vice President of Research's office. We have a couple of faculty that are more sort of entrepreneurial faculty to represent that voice as well. And then we have not a part of that committee, but we have an external advisory committee to that committee made up of some community members, some people from our angel investment community, as well as our state and local government.
So for our next question, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick share screen to reference this slide. It's from Mike Roberts again. He was wondering what happened at UK between 2017 and 2018, as there was a big jump then. Was there a process change that occurred at that point in time?
There was. I mean, the biggest change was a level of support. Up until our fiscal year 17, which is really the year 2016, we were a small office. We were sort of an understaffed office relative to the amount of research at the university. We had about 5 full-time employees in our office. And the university decided to make a large investment in the office. We doubled in size from 5 people to 12 in that year. You see the big jump. And we focused that entire year on faculty messaging and being in front of them. We started a newsletter. We started doing department chair presentations, that faculty education series that I just mentioned, and really getting out and doing innovation harvesting work. And we did change a lot of process. So we added people, but we also created new capabilities. We developed before 2000. Here's the best way to explain it. Before 2017, we were called the Intellectual Property Development Office, and so we were known both internally as well as externally across the campus and in the community as just sort of a administrative IP office, and that's all we did is just file IP. We changed the name to Office of Technology Commercialization in addition to adding the people. And then we were structured to have a licensing team, dedicated licensing people, a new ventures team, dedicated creation people, and then an IP development team that focused on the IP.
Great. Well, I think we have time for one more question. This is from Mike again, and it's to Allyson. So a chicken and an egg issue. How do you engage people with your office before there's anything substantive to engage with?
Right. And so for us in the beginning, a lot of it was actually not talking about intellectual property necessarily at all. Again, we reached out on grant applications in terms of how can we make your background section more competitive. A lot of them were already talking with industry about some possible sponsored research. So we came in and we said, this is how we can help you make that conversation go a little bit quicker, but ensure that you're in compliance with state law and what the Office of Research can do for you in that, those types of things. And then actually circling back to that first question too about the provisional budget and what's cheap with the chicken and egg thing. Couple of things on that. First, one, if you are in a state and you're public, make sure that you're reaching out to the other universities in your state that already engage with outside counsel, because there are very often state laws and requirements as to how you can engage with a patent attorney. I noticed I've got two of my team members here on this, Almisha at JSU and Jeremy with Mississippi State. We have a very centralized way that we can engage with patent counsel. I just can't go out and ask a patent attorney to write a provisional for me. So that's one. The advantage of that though is if you've got a sister institution in the state that does have an Ian with that kind of volume base, and there's an avenue, a lot of times you can piggyback and say, hey, would you be willing to do 2 or 3 provisionals for us at this modified budget? And they tease that as a way to possibly get a client. This is what we did in the beginning. And then we could go and say, okay, I think I've got, and then I went and got the budget, and I had those 2 provisionals those first year where I could go out and then engage with faculty members and try and I did have something in my pocket to offer them.
Good strategy. So Norma had a follow-up question for Ian. Norma's with Southern University and A&M College. She wanted to know if you had buy-in from the top administrators when you made that big leap with funds for your office.
We did, and that was, I just responded to Norma in the chat. That was paramount, and it remains paramount, right? You can't really produce a technology transfer without having support from the top administration, because it's important to even have some messaging come from them to show the faculty and the deans that this is important to the top administrators. So we created an event, we call it Patent Palooza. And we made certain that at the very first Patent Palooza in 2017, which is a celebratory event, we hand out some awards to people who got patents and licenses done to faculty. But we wanted to make sure that we had the president come and say a few words. And so at the very beginning, he came and spent 5 minutes saying a few words about how important this type of activity is. Innovation is important to the university. And that went over so well that we've gone from 50 people attending that to 175 in this past year, and the president comes each year. And that little 5 minute, of having the president with a mic in his hand in front of 100 faculty to talk about how important tech transfer is incredible. It really is.
All right. Well, I think we're about out of time. So we had some great discussion. I just wanted to share with you, we have one more session. It'll be August 26th, and the focus will be strategies for engaging companies with researchers and entrepreneurs. So thank you all so much for joining us today. The slides, I haven't made the slides yet available, but I will make the slides as well as the recording to everyone who participated. So thank you again, and it was great to see everyone.